What's going on, Helsinki? How you doing? It's like this guy said something, you said something. Nah, it's cool. So yeah, I want to talk to you guys about blockchain today. I also want to just put my logo on the screen because I like seeing it really big. There it is. So I own an agency in New York called iPullRank. We do a lot of things in the marketing space, but I've also just gotten very passionate about blockchain over the last 2 years or so. So let's start with where we are with blockchain. Well, you see curves like this when we talk about technology all the time with early adoption and so on and so forth. Right now, we're still in that early adopter phase, and it hasn't gotten to the point where blockchain is really that mainstream with regard to people actually using it. So when you look at the popularity of blockchain versus cryptocurrency, you find that people are way more interested in the money aspect of it than the technology. And I believe that's for a variety of reasons. I mean, one of which is that people just want to get rich easily, and cryptocurrency kind of offers you that dream. And then you've got the reality that there is no dApp or decentralized application that is better than its centralized counterpart, at least not yet. So there's three core problems I see with blockchain as it currently stands. It's very high friction, it's got low performance, and it's not very secure. And let's talk about those things. First of all, setting up a wallet is almost as difficult as setting up an Ubuntu box for Linux. If your mom can't do this, then it's not the type of thing that's really going to catch on just yet. And then achieving consensus across the network takes a very long time. So it could take 10 to 60 minutes for your block to get accepted to the network. Then you've got this issue where, hey, if you started to mine Bitcoin, you may have some child porn on your computer. Bit of a problem. Then you've got other security issues, specifically with Ethereum. So you've got a few known attacks that they highlight, a few of which are caused by race conditions, where basically if you're waiting for data outside of your contract, that can potentially take over your smart contract. Then you've got the issue of integer overflow or underflow, where if you set the contract value to be below, or excuse me, that uint to be below the maximum or above the maximum, either it goes back to zero or it goes to the maximum. So that's a problem where your smart contract can suddenly be worth the maximum amount. Then you've got the issue of, if I forcibly send you Ether to your smart contract, it could potentially circumvent your fallback function. So another situation where somebody could easily take over your smart contract. And that's what we're seeing with a lot of these hacks, like the DAO hack and so on and so forth. But the real situation here is that we are in the internet's latest gold rush. We've seen this a number of times. We've seen it with domaining, we've seen it with affiliate marketing, we've seen it with SEO, where people are just like, let me get into this and make as much money as possible. And let me just do something that I don't really care about, but it's an opportunity to make money. So also, ICOs at this point are surpassing venture capital. There's far more money being raised by issuing your own coin than there is by people going after venture capital, which is really interesting. So it's got a lot of people thinking like, hey, let me just make my own coin. But if you don't really think this through and what the value is here, you kind of look like Dilbert's boss. It's like, hey, we need a blockchain. What color blockchain do you want? Don't be that asshole. So the real question you have to ask first is like, okay, do we actually need a blockchain? And there's a lot of studies out there. There's a lot of people with workflows and flow charts that are like, hey, if your application meets these criteria, then you definitely need a blockchain. They look a little like this. But when you think about this more critically, okay, yeah, that's if you're going to follow what other people think, but it's really just a design decision. It's just like when you decide, hey, are we going to go NoSQL versus using a SQL database? It's the same type of thing. There's benefits, there's pros and cons from both sides, but either way, you could actually not use the database at all. You could use flat files if you really wanted to. So what makes the most sense for what you're trying to accomplish? Now, I think of blockchain as another building block of the internet. Just like FTP, just like HTTP, it's something that's not going to disappear. It's going to be something that, as it matures, we're going to be able to use in a variety of ways. So if you look at it like this, before we had Google, we had Gopher. It was the old search engine for looking at the internet as it stood. Before we had Reddit, we had Usenet. Old protocol, but rebuilt for the modern era. So what is blockchain going to give us? What are going to be some of the use cases for blockchain that are built from what we have right now? But as you consider investing in projects, or as you consider building your own project, the real question you have to ask is, does this project need a token? So let's dig into that. How do you know if you need a token for your blockchain project? Well, oftentimes you'll hear the arcade analogy, where arcades often have tokens that allow you to play games. So you put in $10 or €10 and you get a bunch of tokens back, which then allow you to play the games. Thing is, no arcade game says insert token. It says insert coin, because every arcade game will work with coins. And what happens is, on the back end, the arcade owner just does this mod to their arcade games, and then they can now accept tokens rather than coins. So why do they do this? Why don't they just use money or fiat currency? It's to keep your money in their economy. So if you walk in there and then you say, hey, let me get change for $10, and then you're like, I don't feel like playing the rest of these games, and then you walk out with $8 because you spent $2 on playing games. Well, because you've exchanged for tokens, and those tokens don't have a value, you can't redeem them for money, you have to continue to use that money within that economy. And that's what ICOs are effectively doing. They're saying, hey, give me your money, or give me your ether, or whatever you're buying in with, and then we turn it into something that you can only use within our economy. So you might actually need a token if you are thinking about a novel consensus model. So a consensus model that's not currently in use in Ethereum or whatever you're building on. So Ethereum works on proof of work, just like Bitcoin does, but there are other models out there like proof of stake, some other things that a lot of other projects have come up with. So if you're thinking of a model that doesn't exist, that's a good reason for you to have a token. If you're trying to regulate intrinsic value within your platform, then it makes sense for you to have a token. So if you don't want to be tied to the economics of Bitcoin itself, which are super volatile and will vary widely for whatever you're trying to do, then you want to have your own token. So for instance, you often hear about, hey, somebody bought a pizza back in the day for 5 Bitcoin. Well, obviously that's worth a lot more money now. So if instead you want it so that, if you're selling something within your network, it is always one token, well, then that way you can determine that by having your own token. So what this boils down to is building novel token economics. Token economics is something that's existed for a very long time. It works within casinos. It works within arcades. It's a science or a methodology that's well thought out. And effectively, you're trying to figure out what are the incentives that you're building so that people support the network, its growth, and what you're trying to accomplish. A project that does this very well is Lisk. I would encourage y'all to check this out if you're thinking about building a project or even thinking about investing a project, because they've built it in such a way where you're issuing network rewards for things that you do on the network that are very effective for keeping that network alive and healthy and doing what you want. So what's the shorthand we can use here? If your project is not dramatically extending the native functionality of the standardized blockchain, then you don't need a token. Another pro tip, if you're looking at projects and the teams involved in those projects, see if there's actually an economist involved in that project. That'll give you a tip as to whether or not the token economics were actually well thought through. Now, I wanted to speak to some other folks who've been doing a lot of projects about this and see what their thinking is around this. I spoke to a gentleman, Mark Z from Consensus, Consensus being a blockchain studio based in Brooklyn, New York, of course. And he told me about a framework that he's built to really solve this or understand this. So he breaks it into 4 components: the token utility canvas, the token mechanics, token legal review, and then token technical design. There's 5 questions that he's looking to have answered to determine whether or not this is a viable token that we're considering. So 1, what is the utility and how essential is it to the business model? What is the consumer token user experience? How do you determine the number of tokens to be issued? How does the system maintain equilibrium? How can it ensure that no participant can take advantage of the system? So digging into this, in my own words, I looked at all those different components that he's talking about using, and it really comes down to, for the first part, why would anybody want this token? Why is it better than, just buying Ethereum and using it? What are the behaviors that the token is meant to actually have people do? And then how does the role of the token play into the actual network or application? And then on the mechanic side, how does that token work with regard to the user experience and the general token economics? And then on the legal review, is it legal for the jurisdiction wherein your project is meant to be used? And then finally, can we actually build this? Does this make technical sense? So how's blockchain going to impact marketing? I think there's a lot of ways that you can say a lot of pie in the sky things here, like, yeah, it's going to change everything that we do in marketing. It's going to make it all easier. Sure, potentially. But I think that there's 4 problems that it really solves. There's 4 core problems that digital marketing has right now. There's ad fraud. I don't know how many of you are involved in paid media, but for every, number of clicks that you're buying, a lot of those clicks are fake, or bots are seeing those impressions and so on. There's ad fatigue, users that don't even see the ads that you have placed. There's privacy, which is a bigger issue that we're seeing with regard to things like Facebook. And then there's identity. So one of the core things that blockchain natively solves is giving you that ability to be anonymous and still use things. Now, a lot of projects are looking at this identity, like how do you take an identity across projects, across different decentralized networks, and also remain anonymous? So what are the features and behaviors that you want to take with you without, saying who you are, giving up any personally identifiable data? A lot of people are doing well with this. Uport is a great project for you to check out. Now, to the point of ad fraud, brands lost $7 billion in ad spend that went to fraudulent clicks or impressions in 2016. That number's only going to go up. So there's a lot of projects out there that are looking to solve this. For instance, there's Clearcoin, wherein you can actually manage your entire media buying cycle using smart contracts across a variety of networks. This is actually pretty cool. And then there are agencies that are starting to pop up that are built entirely on the blockchain. So any of the media buying that they're doing on your behalf, they're able to be completely transparent with it. So they're using Ethereum. They've built their own dApps for managing this process so clients can basically look at everything that they're doing, and they're not hiding any of that media spend that they're using. But I think one of the bigger potential projects that has come out is the Brave browser. And this is dramatically different from some of these other projects in that it's a browser that basically blocks all ads and all JavaScript trackers. So it gives you complete control over what you're seeing on the web. It gives you complete control over what can be tracked about you. It gives you complete control over your ad experience. So what they've done here is they've actually just forked Chromium, so the same open source project behind Chrome. And that's great because they're going to be able to maintain all the same standards of the browser that most of us are already using. To date, I read the other day that Brave has 5 million monthly active users. So it's a good start. Obviously, there are more than 2 billion people on the internet, but nevertheless, it's a good start. So one of the things that they do is they allow you to pay publishers for the content that you're consuming. And by that token, no pun, you now are able to supplant the fact that you don't want to see advertising by paying for the content that you actually like. This concept's called the basic attention token. And this is another thing that can dramatically change the way that marketing works, in that, it's going to be far less about just display ads that we all ignore and more about things that we're actually engaged with. So what this also does is it keeps that anonymity that we're talking about, but it allows people to put out ads that are far more engaging for the people that they're targeting. So the whole point here is that as blockchain matures, marketing is going to have to confront the issues that it's having across, a lot of things. So those 4 key areas that we just talked about. So let's scratch, because obviously if I'm talking about blockchain, I'm probably doing something with it too, right? All right, let's watch this.
Every day, millions of musicians log on to their favorite music sites to discuss, debate, and share everything from the latest clown step track to what's trending on the baby metal scene. These communities are also home to thousands of transactions every year, with musicians selling and trading everything from chap hop apparel to Simpson wave beats to Mongolian throat rap verses to medieval rock instruments. You get the idea. However, because there's no secure peer-to-peer payment system, many of these agreements are disputed, leaving thousands of buyers and sellers feeling, well, screwed. AF. And this is where Scratch comes in. Scratch tokens are the new way of selling and trading on music communities by adding the security of blockchain smart contracts. Sounds fancy, real simple. The parties simply agree on the smart contract terms and receive status updates until the deal's complete. Transactions can happen natively on any website, message board, online community, or social network. Users will have the ability to review each other's history and trust score, making the process safe and frictionless. Plus, any postings you make can be distributed across any Scratch-enabled host site, helping you generate more interest in whatever you're selling or trading. And best of all, paying using Scratch costs a fraction of the fee of using a credit card or other digital payments, which means that more of your hard-earned dollar goes to her instead of him. To learn more about how Scratch can empower music fans and communities, go to scratchcoin.com. Scratch, secure music transactions.
So a little background here. I used to rap for a living. That was mentioned earlier. In fact, this picture was taken me performing here in Finland. Real quick side story. First time I came to Europe, we did a show. We came to Finland, and the first place we went was to Rovaniemi, and I met the real Santa Claus. That shit was cool. Yo, it was really Santa Claus. Anyway. So, all right, the context here is that I was a meme in 2005. And the reason why I was a meme in 2005 was because there was a rapper that I punched in the face, and somebody took a picture of it. I don't, think violence is cool, but I think in this case it was warranted. So I had actually met this guy and hired him on a website called undergroundhiphop.com. I hired him to rap on a song of mine. And ultimately, he never did it. And then I saw him somewhere, and, you saw the picture. So the reality of it is that whole situation could have been avoided with smart contracts. And another thing that I noticed in looking at that site today, there's a lot of transactions like that happen. People meet each other on message boards, people they've never met before, they enter into these transactions, and things may go wrong. I also noticed that other message boards in the music space, a lot of this is happening as well. So beginning of 2017, I actually bought that website. So undergroundhiphop.com is now something that I own. And I came up with this idea of Scratch, where effectively these sites that have these special interest message boards can be added to this distributed marketplace, and then a seller can say, hey, here's what I have for sale. Somebody buying something can then, of course, buy it. It can all be governed by smart contracts, and then the host website where it's sold can get a cut of that money. So the whole thing is that the buyers and sellers would be able to cut out the middleman, like not use something like an eBay or anything to that effect, and really just enter into peer-to-peer transactions between each other. So the way it would work is like, you post something that you're looking to sell, buyer says, hey, I want to buy it, you construct a smart contract, there's a series of verification steps that happen to then release the payment once they happen. And if at any point, either person doesn't fulfill their obligation, well, the money can be returned to that person, and then the person that didn't fulfill it then receives a penalty, and all that stuff is tracked. So we have a smart contract builder, which is visual. You drag and drop the different conditions that you're looking to engage with. And you can also see the status of the different verification steps as you do it, and you can also see the transaction history of people that you're looking to engage with. So to the point of identity, people on these types of sites, they have a different identity for each site. So you might have an identity for undergroundhiphop.com, you might have one for YouTube, you might have one for any number of sites, but you want to make sure that your transaction history can go everywhere with you while you remain anonymous, and that's one of the things that it does. Then we have this thing called the trust score, where basically, based on the different verification steps that you actually complete, then we can determine whether or not you are trustworthy. And so any dispute resolution that comes up can be automated using this score. It's largely built from forum plugins. It's built from the browser extensions, and it's the type of thing that any site can jump onto pretty easily using an SDK. So based on what I said about tokens earlier, you might be wondering, why does this need a token? Why can't we just use Ethereum? Or your other question might be, why does it need blockchain? It doesn't necessarily need blockchain, but it does need a token if we are using blockchain. So it needs a token because we want to use proof of stake rather than proof of work. In this case, we have to have people that are part of the network that the more stake that they have, the more valuable they are, the more likely that they will mine the actual blocks. Proof of work is going to be too slow for what we're trying to accomplish. Then, because to launch, we are launching with 2 different protocols at play. All those verification steps, if we did them all on Ethereum, there would be too much gas wasted and nobody would make any money. So the verification steps could be like, reviewing the tracking code to see if the thing was actually delivered, or comparing 2 images of what was said to be sent versus what was received. So if you do a lot of those, because in the case of a tracking code, you may have to check every day or every couple hours or whenever the user wants to check it. And if we did that too many times, the smart contract would run out of gas, and then there wouldn't be enough money to then send it to the seller once it's completed. So to that point, we're using Hyperledger Fabric to support all the messages that will be required for the management of the verification steps, and then the actual money is managed on the Ethereum side. Ultimately, I suspect we'll end up building our own blockchain. And then for the token economics, or specifically the economics for what is the value going to be for the token intrinsically within the platform, we have a minimum price for anything that can be sold across the platform. And that would be set by the people that have the stake in the platform itself. So again, we need that to be its own token, so it's outside of what's going on with any token that exists. So yeah, Scratch Coin, that's what we're doing. I would encourage you to check it out. So other projects that I think are interesting and ones that you should be comparing yourself to, or even just thinking about as you're thinking about doing blockchain projects. So I think one of the gold standards in this space is Filecoin. Filecoin came out a couple years back, so it's not new, but I think they did a really good job in defining an actual protocol. They weren't just like, hey, let's spin up something so we can make a bunch of money and disappear, like most of these ICOs are doing. Filecoin is essentially like a blockchain version of Dropbox. And their white paper is highly technical, but most of the people in the room being technical, I would encourage you to check it out and compare whatever you're doing against that. Then just another marketing use case, I think LeadCoin is actually really interesting in that it does solve a big problem for lead generation websites. So oftentimes when you generate leads through whatever marketing efforts that you're doing, you end up with leads that you can't use. So you're like, how do I get rid of these? How can I sell these? How can I get value out of these? LeadCoin creates a distributed network or decentralized network wherein you can sell your leads to other people across the network and then manage that using crypto. So I mentioned a lot of the problems that Ethereum has natively from a security perspective. I think EOS has done a good job of solving those, and I think it's going to become one of the next big protocols that a lot of us are building things on top of. So I would encourage you to check that out. And then finally, if you recognize like, hey, I don't need a blockchain, but I need some of the value that blockchains add, I also don't need a token, I would encourage you to check out Craxel. Craxel is a technology that's quite similar to how blockchain works. It gives you that layer of security, but it also gives you a little bit more control. And then one more point that I want to make, if you're getting into this stuff just to get rich, don't be the person that's trying to mine the gold. Be the person that's selling the pickaxes. So over the last year, NVIDIA has had an enormous run of their stock because they sell the hardware that people are using to mine. So think through, what are some of the components that people absolutely must have to do these things, and then figure out, hey, maybe I can make some money there. So what should you take away? What should you remember from everything that I've just said to you? 1, most things don't necessarily need tokens. You can actually just use regular money and have the same effect. But if you are going to use a token, make sure you look at your token economics in depth. Make sure that you're thinking through, how is this going to operate? Does this make sense? Is this something that adds value or utility to what the actual network that you're already using has? And then solve these 5 questions. What is the utility and how essential is it to the business model? What is the consumer token user experience? How do you determine the number of tokens that are going to be issued? How does the system maintain equilibrium? And how can it ensure that no participant can take advantage of the system? So, to wrap it up, I'm Zora's dad. My name is Mike King. I'm a recovering big agency guy, also full stack marketer and full stack developer. There's my logo again. Looks beautiful. We do all of these things. We've also got a guide to machine learning for marketers, so you might want to check that out. Scratch, check that out. Eagles won the Super Bowl. Just think about that for a second. And that's all I got.
Wow, thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Yeah, enjoyed that.
Now it's time for some questions.
Yeah, hit me.
Do we have any in the audience?
Did you guys already know all those things?
Yeah, go
Here
ahead.
we have one.
Yes, thank you for the presentation.
You're welcome.
Question about the trust. So when your Scratch goes live, do people have to trust you to integrate the real world with the token?
No.
Could you elaborate a bit?
Yes. So you don't have to trust me because all of the different verification steps are based on real world actions. So essentially we're using a bunch of oracles that are off chain, and then we bring them onto the chain using the oracles. And then that way, anything that is verified has to be verified by something that's effectively empirical. It would be very difficult for you to jump between the oracle and the smart contract. So it's not really a question of trusting me. It's more a question of trusting the software, which is open source, and you can see how it works.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So another question? I think I see any from the board then.
We have one here. Is blockchain still in its infancy? For example, like an iPhone 1 seems clunky as hell for us right now.
Yeah, I would definitely say that blockchain is still in its infancy because, again, those 3 problems that I just highlighted, it's not fast, it's not better than a centralized app, and it's just really difficult to use. So I think the iPhone 1 is a good example because when I first got that, I was like, this doesn't operate the way I would think it does at all. But now the latest iPhone is very intuitive. It's quite fast until they put out a new one, and then it gets slower magically. But yeah, I think absolutely we're definitely in that phase. And I would actually compare it to the early days of the web. So back in '95 when I was building my first websites, I was in high school at this point, and I would tell my friends, I'm like, yo, I built a website. It's so cool. And they're like, yo, what is a website? And then, more and more people started to use the web, but the whole idea of typing HTTP:// whatever was just so foreign to everyone. But as the protocol becomes more commonplace and easier to use and not like setting up a Linux box, the more people are going to use it and the more value that we're going to see from it, and the more people are going to build things that are actually better than a centralized application.
Right.
Are there no more questions? I'm so disappointed.
Oh, and there's 3 of them.
One right here.
Right, let's start in the front.
Thanks for the talk.
You're welcome. Thanks for
What do you
coming.
think about coin fatigue? That there's so many new coins coming out, new
Right.
applications of blockchain, all of them using their own thing. What do you think about that? How is your coin different from the others? How is it going to be more used than the others?
Yeah, I don't know how my coin is different from others because I've just been focused on building mine. But I will say that we are absolutely getting to the point of coin fatigue because people are just like, oh, another coin. And then they don't go through the process of actually like reading the white paper, understanding the use cases. They're just looking at the headline and being like, okay, this isn't different from that. So I think it's a reality with this being such a technical space. And that's why when we wrote our white paper, it was written to be read. It's not like super like, it's not like a academic white paper. It answers all those questions, but it's written in a way where like people that actually like to read things can read it. So I think to your point, yes, that is definitely going to be a problem, but I think that's a problem in anything. It's a problem in like the democratization of music, where anybody can make an album. So it's like, how do you now know what a good album is? Well, what you do is you use what you've always used. You use like reading magazines or the things that just rise to the top through those standard channels to basically separate the wheat from the chaff. So I suspect that's what's going to end up happening, and it's going to limit what actually is successful, not just because it's good or not. It's just like, was it marketed well?
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so I have a question.
Oh, wait, some more questions?
Here. What is your opinion on all of the black hat marketing happening in the space?
Well, how are you where are you?
Here.
Oh.
Yeah.
How do you define black hat marketing in this case? There.
Mainly fraudulent ratings, guerrilla marketing, shilling, things like that.
I don't think it's any different from black hat marketing and anything else. So, the space I primarily come from is SEO. So I know a lot about, black hat from that perspective. Also, a lot about what's going on with black hat in this perspective. But I think it really comes down to people not allowing themselves to be taken advantage of. I think you really need to educate yourself before you put your money up. Like, I think that's a general thing that a lot of people are not taking their own accountability for. And I think that's why the SEC, at least in the States, are rapidly coming after crypto and being like, no, this is a security. You need to treat it like a security so that people can be more protected. So I don't know that the black hat marketing going on in crypto is any worse than in any other space. And again, I think people just need to be educated before they spend money on things.
Right. Yeah.
There's one right here. Questions. Questions are my favorite part because, like, I obviously know what I said, and I want to know what y'all think.
You seem to be like an enthusiastic hip-hop fan, so could you do us a little freestyle rap about
Maybe we need beatboxing with that.
Is this happening right now?
It might. It's up to you.
I need an actual mic if I'm going to do that. I can't do it with the Janet Jackson mic. Let me get
We have those. If that's the requirement, I think we can make something happen. Yeah, big hat.
Check.
All right.
1, 2. Yo. On paper, I'm SEO's Don Draper, innovative agency, native, creative, strong-natured. A blog flater that above all applauds haters like Jedi with Darth Vader as a wallpaper. Mike King, crafted man of the mirror that the littles a linen pin like Manny Rivera, and I channel the spirit and damage the era. Okay, I gotta spit this off the top of the dome. Drop in the zone, can't see me with your binoculars on. Yeah, okay, you see I break joints right here, Reaktor Breakpoint. They got me freestyling here in Helsinki. You wanna come around and come in and well blink me off the top of the mind. When I'm dropping design, I can transform like I'm Optimus Prime. That's enough.
Yeah.
Wow.
All right. Thank you for that.
And that's what happens when you got 7 minutes left and nobody's asking.
All right. Yeah. Okay. Then I think that concludes our Q&A. I'm sure there's more where that came from during the after party if any of you are interested in hearing more. So yeah, thanks again. Give it a Mike King.